My name is Kevin Hines, and in the year 2000, I nearly died by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. I was depressed, I was terribly suicidal, and I thought I was a burden to my family. This was the furthest thing from the truth. I am beautiful, and so are you. Life is the greatest gift we've ever been given or will ever be given. So live it with me, and be here tomorrow and every single day after that. Welcome to the Mental Health Marvels Podcast. Hello.
How you doing?
How are you, my friend?
Doing great. How about you?
It is good to see you again. Javionn, am I pronouncing Javionn correctly, by the way?
Yeah, Javion.
Javionn, I love that name. And Nolla, right? Javionn Nolla.
Yes.
Javionn, I met you at your place of work, and we chopped it up, and you're looking to move into the corporate world. But that's not the story we want to talk about today.
Definitely.
Not at all. I want to talk to you about how you felt since you were 4 years of age. All right, I want to start there. From what I read about you and the story you told me, I want to know what you felt from 4 years of age that you knew in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
Break it down, my friend.
Man, 4 years of age. I remember growing up with my mom and my brothers, and at a young age, I always knew who I was as a person. I always knew who I was meant to be or who I would grow into. But a lot of times, our parents or the people around us, they give us these identities and they put us into these boxes. And I never fit the mold of the box that I was put into. So since I was 4, I had to fight to be who I was. And so what that looked like was my mom would cut my brother's hair, and I would want my hair cut too. She didn't want to cut it. I say, Mom, I need a haircut. She'd be like, no, I'm just going to keep braiding your hair. Okay. I remember she would try to always force me into wearing dresses. I didn't want to wear dresses, Kev. So I remember at a young age, we would fight constantly about what I would wear because I would not put on the clothes that she would try to put me into. And yeah, so ever since I could remember, I've always been an individual who I was very firm in what I believed. I was very firm in what I would and would not do, or what I would or wouldn't allow people to do to me. Yeah.
So for the people at home watching who may feel, or online watching, that this is a vague statement, if that's okay for me to say, you were born a girl. And that's not what you felt deep inside.
Right.
All right. And when that first started happening to you, what did it do to your mentality?
Man, so mentally as a kid, I was in a place of confusion and frustration with constantly having people try to tell me who I was when I knew that wasn't who I was, or how they perceived me wasn't true to what I felt within myself. And so it was frustrating. It was hurtful. I remember being sad and angry a lot because I never felt like people could actually see me for who I actually was.
And when they couldn't see you, and they didn't notice what you felt on the inside, that your outside reflected something different, how did they treat you?
And
from family to people that you knew very little, how did they treat you?
They treated me like a lot of women are treated today, which to me is unacceptable, but it gives me a different perspective. So a lot of times how little boys are raised and how little girls are raised is completely different. So you want to be soft and sensitive with girls. You want to try to help them do things. Whereas guys, you want to let them fall down and get back up. Or you give them the ability to be able to speak up. Whereas girls are a lot of times told that they have to be quiet and ductile. They can't do a lot of things that guys can do. Which to me was complete, it was crap.
Ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And in this day and age, we still live with a lot of that today.
Yeah.
We see a lot of competition between male and female. That you can't complete what I can complete as a man. I have more. You read certain men's health magazines, and they talk about how men have more ability to grow more muscles, so they can lift more, they can do more. But then I'm in talking to you, I think of the commercial from Nike that just came out about the girls that can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
and everything that a man or anybody else can do in a competitive sports situation. But back to your story. Javion, there was a piece of your story I read that really affected me and impacted me. It was that you didn't hate yourself. You loved who you were and who you felt you were and who you are. But even though I think from what I could read from the outside perspective, everyone else was so maybe not against you, but they didn't follow you, they didn't understand you, they couldn't empathize with you. You began to self-harm. Now, self-harm is a bit of an epidemic in this country and around the world. And I'm not going to ask you how you self-harm, because that would be inappropriate for the audience that's thinking about it. What I want to know is what led you to self-harm, and finally, and then what led you to stop.
Got you. So I remember being in middle school when I originally started, and it was just this feeling of anger, frustration, and feeling like I wasn't in control of what was going on around me, not being able to be in control of myself. Again, having so many people tell you who you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to be doing. Even as a kid, you have to go to school, you have to do your homework, you have to do these things. I didn't really have any freedom, and I felt like I was being pulled in a lot of directions. So the thing for me was I felt control. It was more so I felt like I was in control of what I was feeling because I was causing it myself. And so that's where that began. And it went on for a while. I think when I got to high school, I started going to therapy. I started talking to different people. And I really started to get in tune with myself and understand what I was doing and why I was doing it. And so my way out, I remember talking to my therapist about this, and my way out was college. She was like, you're in high school and now you're dealing with all these people, all these people that you've been around, that you've grown up around. She's like, when you get to college, it's a whole new different ball game. You get to start over from scratch. And I started looking forward to that. I was excited to go to college. I remember I graduated early, and after, it's funny, I finished out school a semester early. So once I finished high school a semester early, I started working. The self-harm stopped. And it's funny because I still think about it. I'm like, what did I do in order to stop that from happening? And it was like, you changed your environment. You changed your environment, and in you changing your environment, you also allowed yourself to change and grow too. And that's ultimately how I got past that.
Do you think that your self-worth changed in order for you to value you more?
Definitely.
Not to self-harm?
Definitely.
That's what it sounds like.
Definitely. Yeah. So my self-worth did grow. My confidence grew. Being in high school, being around a bunch of people, again, who don't understand you, who make fun of you, who pick at you, who just are just mean for no reason. It's easy for you to not like yourself. It's easy for you to not care about yourself, or to be angry at yourself. I feel like a part of me was angry at myself, not because of who I knew I was internally, but just because of how people treated me, because of what they perceived me to be. Or for whatever reason they did what they did. But again, like once I left that environment, my confidence grew. I was able to be around people who genuinely liked me for me, which also, helped with my confidence in myself. And my self-worth grew as well. Like working my first job, and I was able to move up within the company very quickly, going from being a bagger to almost a manager position in almost 6 months. Like that really did something for me as well. So that definitely helped me.
Now, you had told me before we began today that you don't connect or relate to the term transgender. Yeah. You've just gone through a transition, and that, as I understand it, you kind of wish people would stop labeling these things and just call us what we are, human.
Yeah.
We're people. What you need to do for you to feel better is yours. What I need to do for me to feel better is mine.
Definitely.
And I want to relate this to something separate from gender totally, and go into mental health. I've been told that I'm suffering from bipolar disorder by every psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, counselor that has ever been a part of my diagnosis. That I'm suffering And it's been conditioned into me that I have bipolar disorder, a term that used to be called manic depression, made up by man. The terms people called you were made up by man. They were invented. So do I really have bipolar disorder? Or am I just me with a different kind of brain?
Exactly.
And that's interesting that we can relate the two of these things together when most people would not.
Yeah, and I can relate a step further. Again, being in middle school with self-harm, I did get hospitalized for that. And while I was in the hospital, they had us, they gave us our diagnosis. I was diagnosed with manic depression. And within that diagnosis, they had us, I'll never forget this day, after I talked to like the psychiatrist, they said, okay, now that you have your diagnosis, we have books we want you to read up on it. We want you to know what your diagnosis is and make sense of it. And so I found myself reading a book on what it meant to be bipolar. And I'm reading the things and I'm like, okay, I can see how that fits, but at the same time, I feel like it can relate to a lot of people. So it being conditioned into you, it was definitely, at a point, I felt like it was conditioned into me to just have these beliefs or these thoughts or these ideas. The interesting thing is, later on in life, I never told anybody that. I usually kept that to myself. But later on, when I went to see other therapists or, other psychiatrists who gave diagnosis, that was never one of them. And so that was an interesting thing to me. It's like a lot of times it's easy to put labels on people or to tell them that they're these things. And it's like you put them in this box. So like going back to the idea of me not identifying with being transgender, that's nothing against like the community or the people within the community who do identify like that. I love it and I respect it. I just think for me it doesn't work, and so I identify as somebody who transitions. I went through an experience, even with being diagnosed or having with dealing with depression. That was something I experienced. I don't say I'm a depressed person. I experienced depression and I went through that.
I totally understand that narrative, and I want to go back to it for just a minute. I get the term bipolar disorder. I understand the definition finitely. I talked about having bipolar disorder for most of my speaking career around the world, and I'm willing to accept that this is a disease I have. I'm just not. As I emerge from some very severe physical pain, and my mindset shifts, I think it's much more profound than that. I believe that people with that diagnosis of bipolar disorder are using maybe just a little bit more of their brain than most, in a way that affects them and causes what we call mania. And when you go up, no matter who you are, at some point it's going to crumb down and you're going to crash. And I come down into this dark abyss of immeasurable brain pain, which is what I'd rather call it, because our brain is an organ just like the rest of our body, and frankly, your brain is directing you to feel this way. Not just feel this way, Javion, but know exactly who you are. And I think it's interesting. It's rare at our age. How old are you?
28.
28. You're 28. You've known what, and how you are since you were 4. How can anybody deny that that's your truth? You know what I mean? And yet we have people all around the world, bigots, who look at you if they knew your story and go, well, that's a bunch of nonsense. And they say things like, well, he can't go in the men's room and at the bathroom, and we put all these parameters around someone who's known their entire life right here who they were. What was the hardest situation you ever had being bullied at school, or being affected at school by other kids who didn't empathize with what you were going through? What was the toughest situation?
I think the toughest situation for me was I used to play basketball. So I played on the girls' basketball team in high school. I was actually pretty good, if I do say so myself. But I wasn't the best. I was one of the better players. But one of the things that would happen was, at that point in time, people would label me as a lesbian. So that was a label I got. I was attracted to women. I didn't really identify with the label of lesbian either. But at that time, it was weird. It was unfamiliar. So I would get picked on and made fun of for things like that, being on the team. And I remember one day I got called a lesbian slur, and I ended up standing up for myself. And me and two of the other girls on the team ended up getting in a fight. And that ended up ending my whole basketball. Like, I didn't want to play basketball anymore after that. And that was one of the things that, like, really broke me down, or like really hurt me at that point, because basketball was my release. It was my way to get away from everything that was going on around me. You know, if I wasn't happy for a day, or even if I was happy, I don't want to go play basketball. I remember growing up in Chicago, or going to my grandmother's house, who lived in Chicago, and it would be snowing outside, and I'd ask my mom, "Can I go play basketball?" She'd be like, "It's snowing. You want to go outside and play basketball?" I kid you not, I would go outside. I'd put some extra air in my ball because, you know, in the cold, it deflates a little bit. And I would go across the street to the park and I would play basketball. I'd come back, my hands would be freezing. But that was just what I love to do. So playing in school, like, it was a big deal to me with everything else going on. Like, all I wanted to do was play basketball. In that situation, like, that was the final straw that I felt like it was just ripped from me.
They took it away from you.
That's what it felt like.
And you were the one being perpetrated against because of who you were and who they assumed you were, calling you those names and referring to you as lesbian when you don't identify with that at all. And you stuck up for yourself, which is what any human being who's being oppressed should do. And then you got the brunt and the heat of the repercussions, and something you loved to do was no more. And then you stopped having that love for that thing, which was your outlet.
Yeah, it was my outlet. Yeah.
Now, moving past basketball and past prejudice from those young girls, I have a question, and I want to be sensitive about this question because I want to make sure that this interview accurately reflects your opinions, your feelings. How would you identify yourself?
It's an interesting question I don't get asked a lot, but I would identify myself as Javion.
That's it.
Yeah, so
I'm Javion.
I'm Javion, so that can encompass a lot of. Me being Javion encompasses a lot of things, a lot of different experiences. But the one thing about me is I don't really like labels because I feel like it boxes me in, and I don't want to be put in a box. There's so many different things that incorporate into who I am as an individual. So I'm just Javion.
You're just Javion. I love that. Like just water. I'm just kidding. No, just Javion. Mm-hmm. And I think that if more people took on that perspective, we'd all be much better off. You know, I'm just Kevin. You're just Javion, and we're doing what we do in our lives to make the lives of the people we love better.
Yeah, definitely.
I love it.
It doesn't negate where you've been or what you've been through. It encompasses all of those things. So, definitely.
Wish I knew you a long time ago.
Yeah.
We'd be friends. We'd be like BFFs. What's something you've experienced as an adult that, from someone who knows, that's been unpleasant? Like someone who didn't accept you as an adult when you told them your truth. Can you break it down?
Yeah. So I think one of the harder things I've had to deal with in my adulthood, since transitioning, is my relationship with my dad. And so growing up, you know, we didn't always have the best relationship, but he is of Nigerian descent, you know. And so with his family values and how he grew up, he just doesn't agree with what he considers a lifestyle. He doesn't understand it. So it did make things very hard in the beginning. But I really believe that in me living my life the way I have and me being who I am and living in my truth, it's allowed me to really grow just based on the different things I've gone through and the experiences I've had with him and other people and what some would consider rejection. I mean, it's really helped me to grow and build on myself profoundly, and just having an understanding and respect for people who have different ideas, different ideologies, and different ways of life. So when I first realized that we weren't going to have a relationship, there was anger and resentment. But over time, that turned into peace and love, you know? And that's due to me having a better understanding of myself and who I am, and understanding that as human beings, we're all not going to agree. We're not all meant to agree. We're not all meant to live our lives the same way. And in that, I was able to find my understanding and my acceptance of him and how he is, and just to still really love him even at a distance. I still have genuine love for my father. And I get it. I understand.
That's your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever find yourself broken down in tears as an adult about the fact that you don't have a relationship?
I have. So he's currently very sick right now.
Okay.
And so with him being sick, I did have that moment, and I think it was just that moment. It was maybe a day for a couple of hours. I just cried, and then something hit me, and it was just like, it's okay. Everything is how it's supposed to be, and it's gonna flow how it's supposed to. And so a lot of the things, even with my dad, just a lot of the things in my life, there's been a lot of negatives that have happened. But as I've grown, all those things actually look like positives to me now. And my relationship with him is definitely one of them. I've learned a lot just in the proximity that I did have to him. I've learned so much from him. And so I have nothing but respect for him. And one of the things that I definitely have learned from him is that we're both very stubborn. That's for sure. But he sticks to his belief. He sticks to his belief no matter what. And we've had conversations where he'll respectfully stick to his belief. And I respect that so much of him. And it allows me to also stick to my belief and my truth, and just to continue to live that freely.
It reminds me of something my friend Jake always says. He says, people are who they are, they will do what they will do, and they're going to be how they're going to be. And there's nothing you can do to change them if they're not willing to change.
Exactly.
I don't think he says it exactly like that. But he basically says that, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but, when I was going through a hard time, when I've gone through several hard times and he's been around, he's always been able to help me understand other people's perspectives. Yeah. So I've had a very distant relationship with my mother for the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. It's been extremely difficult on me. I wake up and go to sleep sometimes crying about it, because this is a woman who handpicked me, adopted me, made me her son, but wants nothing to do with the current me. Mm-hmm. And that is heartbreaking. So I feel your pain on that one. I wanted to mention that. Now, what strikes me about you, Javion, is your ability to see multiple perspectives at such a young age, accept them, and move forward. I feel like not everyone is able to do that in such a kind and compassionate way. And I think that folks out there hearing your story and hearing the pain you did go through and that you do go through with your father, and you just showing this world your reality, I think it's going to change a lot of people's perspectives on the other side of the lens, because they're going to see that they can be strong in their narrative and truth just as you are, and that's a beautiful thing. I want to ask you about what have been, we've talked about the negative, we've talked about the hurt and the pain. What have been some really positive experiences of acceptance and that have filled your heart while you're going through this and as you've gone through it since 4 years of age?
Wow. So the interesting thing about me is my perspective when it comes to my transition. I think it's been the most positive for me, because I look back on everything I've been through and I feel as though I needed to go through everything I went through to get to the point that I'm at now, because it has allowed me to have the perspective and the perception that I do have in a lot of situations. So a positive for me to have been able to transition while growing up and being growing up as a girl is my ability to understand privilege, my ability to create space for different individuals and understand what that looks like, my ability to know what it looks like to take a step back to allow other people to have space and not take up too much space. It's given me the ability to have an understanding of how other people live and to be able to ask questions. So For example, one of the things that I intentionally try to do when around women is I make sure that I don't take up too much space. I make sure that I ask for consent in all type of situations. Whereas I don't feel like men who wouldn't have been raised like I was or wouldn't have lived a life as a girl, they wouldn't understand what it's like to be in a lot of different situations as a woman. And I get those things. So sometimes I have women look at me like I'm crazy because I'll ask consent before I give a hug. Is it okay for me to hug you? I'll ask consent. Is it okay if I ask you to come here, or is it okay if I put my hand on your back? And a lot of times I feel like that's due to what I've been through. My approach in a lot of situations. Saying I'm a lot, but the and also working in a corporate position or being in a business and working around a lot of men a lot of times, and you see how men are treated versus how women are treated. A lot of times women are again expected to sit back and not say too much, whereas men do a lot of the talking. So due to how I was raised and how I grew up and my perspective, I'm very intentional in making sure that I create space for women. And I'll ask questions like, do any of the women have something to say? Or, hey, I saw that you had a really good idea, or I think you had something on your mind. Did you want to, let us know what you were going to say? So definitely, I feel like it's a positive that I have the perspective that I do have. And I think that there's a lot of value in not only me, but in people like me who have similar experiences to the ones that I have. Because a lot of times there's this discussion and debate between men and women. And I feel like some of us have the ability to help close that gap or to create more understanding amongst men and women if we were given the ability to do that or the opportunity to do so.
I think that's amazing. You're sitting at potentially a boardroom or a table, and women are being ignored, and you make sure they're being heard because A, you've been there, and B, you see that line that's that thin line that's that's separating them, and you're in doing that, you're bringing people together, which is very special.
And then speaking from what I feel like I've done or try to help with on the women's perspective, from the male perspective too, a lot of times when I'm around other men, again, because nobody can tell unless I tell them that I've transitioned, I'm again able to hold a certain kind of space. I'm able to have certain conversations with different guys and to make it comfortable. So a lot of times when I'm around, even like my gym buddies who they don't know, they're probably going to know now that if they watch this, that I have to transition. But we have conversations about like emotions. A lot of guys don't like to talk about stuff like that. So those are things I'll bring up so that we'll talk about it. Or I have conversations about, bro, what does consent look like to you? Or like in this kind of situation, what would you do? And I feel like, again, it's bridging this gap. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. A lot of the guys I've talked to, how they were raised too, they speak about like being raised to hypersexualize women in a lot of ways. And so those are things we talk about and just getting that different perspective. And because I've lived it, even though they don't know that I've lived it, I bring that to the table as well. And I think that I believe it's a positive because, again, a lot of times men and women aren't able to have these conversations without one of us getting upset or one of us getting angry, or there being a lot of emotion that comes out. And so it's being able to plant the seed without someone always knowing that that's what you're trying to do or that's what's happening.
So you're affecting lives of both men and women in your experience in a way that makes them better people potentially. What does your support network look like, and who are the folks in your life that have completely got your back, no matter what you are going through, emotionally, mentally, and given the fact that you are who you are?
The first person that came to mind was my mom, hands down. Support network. If I'm crying, if I'm angry, like she's just always there. But the interesting thing is that throughout my transition, I've had different support networks. So at different stages of the transition, I've had different support networks. My mom wasn't always, on board with everything that was going on because there was a lot of acceptance and things she had to do for herself. And so within that, I had to create my own support network. I had to create another family. so that support network I met at a conference that I went to, and it was my ex-girlfriend and her family. And they took me in, they looked out for me, and it was like we had a family bond for a long period of time, and they really helped me to get to the point that I'm at now. After I transitioned from that point in my life with them, I created another support network through people I work with, and just over the years, like, there's been different support networks. So there's different networks of people who have helped me through different parts of my life, and I'm thankful and grateful for all of you. But yeah, so I just think anytime you're going through any type of transition, not just the one similar to what I've gone through, because as humans, we all transition at some level, and to some degree. They say that, when you're going to the next stage, you might lose some people. And that's definitely been true for me, and I believe that might be true for a lot of other people too. And so within that, you create different support systems every step of the way.
I like that the way you put it. All across your life, it's been different people in different places for different reasons. I think I can equally say the same. My support network 20 years ago isn't the same that it is today, and the people that are willing to listen, empathize, understand, without judgment, are different than they were before. And there were certainly people, when they heard I had bipolar disorder, or they heard I jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, that exited immediately from my life. And I think in looking at it from your perspective, or from my buddy Jake's, you just go, that's what they had to do for them. That's what they had to do for them to feel better, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. It hurts like hell, always. But we are lucky we have the people we do. When you think about all the individuals who feel or who don't have a support network that is strong and resilient and helpful, and around and supportive. So I think that's wonderful that you explain the transition, not just of your existence as a human, but the transition of different networks across your 28 years, right? I've got a question for you that I want you to tell me, because I'm curious if you even have any recollection of this, because it's hard to recall at this young of an age. But 1 through 4 years of age, do you remember any of it?
Probably just 4.
Probably just 4. Probably just when things, when you knew.
When I knew, yeah. I'll never forget, like, Mom, I want my hair cut. And she's like, I'm not cutting your hair.
You wanted a haircut to be like
my brother.
Like your brothers, yeah. And what kind of haircut did they have? Just curious. Was it a crop cut? What was it?
I don't know what my mom did. Like, now looking back, it's like, you really didn't want that hair.
No, you wanted hair. My mom used to cut my hair, me and my brother's hair, and my brother after a little while was like, "You're not cutting my hair anymore."
Right. Yeah.
And when she cut my hair, if she was distracted by one thing, it would just go, and then you'd have a hole right here. Then she'd have to shave the whole thing.
Yeah. Pretty much. They would be involved.
The same thing. So, is there a story within your entire story that you think people need to hear because it affected you and it could affect them?
Definitely. I think one of the stories that I haven't spoken on, but I feel like it was one of the biggest life changers for me, was moving from Chicago to Baltimore. So it was, I think, a year after I started transitioning. I was living at home with my mom and my brother, and one day I just decided, like, it's time for me to go. So mind you, I had a car that I'd had for a couple of years that was paid off. I had a place to stay. I had 2 jobs. I was actually doing pretty okay living in Chicago. But something in me was like, it's time to go. And so I think I was supposed to be going to a friend's house to visit. And instead of me going to visit, I ended up packing 2 suitcases, leaving all the rest of my stuff in Chicago, car, everything, jumping on a Greyhound with $50 in my pocket. And I went to Baltimore. And I stayed in Baltimore. And, I'm so thankful for the people who let me live with them and stay with them and their family during that transitional period. Again, transition, but that transitional period for me. And while I was there, I didn't have a job when I got there, but within 2 days I was going on interviews. I was putting in applications, and I was working jobs that I never thought I would have to work. So I was working, I think I started out working in a hotel. So I worked at the Baltimore Hotel, the Lord Baltimore, something like that. But I worked at the hotel downtown in the cafe, the coffee shop. I was the only black guy in there, the only male in there, the only male with locks in there. So a lot of different things going on. I was the only one down there. And it was very interesting just being there, being in that atmosphere and working there. And I liked it at first, and I started to hate it. I started to despise it. It was just what I was seeing. I didn't like what I was seeing. Just being downtown Baltimore and being around so many corporate people, and also seeing so many homeless people too, and how corporate people could come in and ask for certain things, and we would give them whatever they needed. But if somebody who was less fortunate, there were certain things that they weren't willing to do. Little things like using the bathroom. And again, for me, being somebody who's been in certain positions, I didn't agree with it. And so again, not having a backup plan or another job, I ended up quitting that job. I ended up leaving. And I think within a week or two, I got another job. And so it was like repetitive, like the transition. It was like, okay, I was here at this point. I was at the hotel. I went through this phase and this stage. I got this information. Then I transitioned into doing factory work. So I worked at a factory for a couple of months. Never thought I would work at a factory, but met some of the most amazing people in my life working at this factory. I was with a group of people for 12 hours a day, every, I think, 5 or 6 days a week, working together. And in that time there, again, being somewhere I never thought I would work, I was able to really relate to and understand other people. We'd have amazing conversations of people just telling me about their life, and me being able to say, like, I understand, I get it, or we relate. And again, that helped me to grow within myself. So just for me starting over, and I think a lot of people are scared to really start over from scratch, but for me, starting over is what led to me getting to the point that I'm at now. Because I literally had to go through, I felt like I went through the ringer just to build my way back up. So I went from staying at somebody else's house to renting a room for $400 a month in like this, it wasn't a trap house, but it was a pretty interesting house. But renting a room out of this house, and my room was like the size of a closet. And going from that to getting a potentially a pretty good job, making pretty good money, and getting my own apartment. And again, it's going through, I went through these different phases, and throughout these phases, I was thinking that the closer I fell to the bottom, I thought as I got closer to the top, I would be happier. When I was what I considered the bottom at that time, when I was at the bottom, that's when I was the most at peace, and that's when I was my happiest. Being around people who understood me. Once I started to get into corporate and work these other positions, that's when like everything felt like I was doing well financially, but that's when things really started to fall apart for me, and I was no longer happy, and I just became like really depressed and sad. So I say all that to say, story-wise, that I feel like a lot of times, a lot of people are scared to start over, and it's okay to start over. Sometimes that's what we need. Sometimes we need a fresh start. Sometimes we need to start where we feel like it's the bottom and work our way up again. Because when you're at rock bottom, it's like a new canvas. You're able to recreate a brand new story for yourself. And it is going to be scary. It is hard. But ultimately, the goals, what you reach in that and what you learn throughout that is very beneficial. And for me, it was life-changing. So even now, I'm at a point where I worked at the same job that I got while I was in Baltimore. I worked that job for about 3 years. I got laid off with the government shutdown. And everybody makes that face. They're like, man, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm like, I'm not.
You're ready to start over again.
I'm not because, again, like being out of work and, not being as financially stable, that is kind of scary. But I'm at peace and I'm happy. And so a lot of things have turned upside down for me in a short period of time. In 2 weeks, I lost my job. I found out my dad had cancer, and I found out that I have to move out of my apartment to a new place. And so for a lot of people, that's a lot. And for me, right now I'm at peace with it. I'm okay with it. One, because I've started over before. I've done it before. And two, because I know that throughout my life, everything that was bad was still good for me. Everything that seemed like a negative is still turned into a positive. And I think that for a lot of people, if we really take the time to reflect and look back on the things we've been through and how if we never would have went through those things, they wouldn't have gotten us to the point that we're at now. I think that's very powerful. So me right now, in all the confusion and chaos that I have going on, I'm at peace and I'm happy because I know that nothing but good is going to come of it. You know, I know I'm going to look back and be like, wow, you went through that again because you had to, but look at where you are now. And I really want anybody who watches this, I want them to know too, like, no matter what you're going through right now and how scary or crazy it might seem, just keep pushing through. And at the end of everything, there's going to be a brighter day, and you're going to be able to look back and understand that everything you went through was for a purpose. And like one of my college professors told me, I remember I was going through something in college, and I'm just like, I don't understand why I'm going through this. And she looked at me and she said, your story is not your own. Your story's not just for you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm living this life. What do you mean my story's not for me? And she's like, it's not just about you. It's about all the people that you're going to help with the story that you have. And so I want y'all to also think about that and remember that too. It's not just about what you're going through here and now. Everything you're going through is going to be powerful for the people that you help who come behind you. So keep going.
I'll end it right there. That was, thank you, Javion.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing everything you did. Thank you for being bold enough to share it on camera, knowing that if people see it that know you, they'll know now, and accepting whatever comes from that. And thank you for just being you, because you're amazing, and we love you.
Thank you.
All right, brother. Thank you very much.